Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you are kicking it with GFAMunited, a spot that's all about inspiring you to be salt and light. So without further ado, let's make it do what it do. Hit it.
Hey yo, my God will take a nobody that nobody knows. No matter the clothes, past sins don't matter no more. See, all that matters is the heart and the condition of sin. Hand your life over to Christ and leave the rest up to Him. We call that salvation, no need for decoration. Come as you are, embrace the Lord, then a celebration. A new life, a new plan, and a new direction. How beautiful are the feet of those that bring His message.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. Today we got none other than Mr. Josh Honeycutt back in the building.
Kuvo.
Let's go. What'd you say?
Kuvo.
Whoa, what's that, man?
It's Colombian for what's up.
Whoa. Hey, did y'all win that soccer game?
We went all the way to the Copa America Championship and lost to Messi.
Miami put it on y'all.
But I'm officially identifying as Colombian now.
That
Since I
makes
live
sense.
in Charlotte, I'm now Colombian because I say I am.
So there's a lot of Colombians in Charlotte? What's it? Cindy's Colombian, right?
Yeah, my family's my family I married.
That's
into
enough
is
Colombian.
Yeah.
So speaking of family, you got baby girl on the way
Man,
any day now.
I'm like excited and nervous at the same time.
That sounds
Like
about
it's
right.
like all the nerves. We almost had her last week, false alarm. And now this week, her mom literally just looked at me before I walked out the door and was like, it's going to be this week. And I know I have what I like to say, like a 3G connection to the Lord.
Yeah.
She has like a 5G connection.
Well, you got to get them G's
So
up, man.
she's going to, when she says something that she feels like it's going to happen, I just trust her.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was wild. She looked at me before I left. She's like, it's this week. I was like, okay. And then
Let's
my
go.
sister called me last night, had a dream it was this week. So it seems like everything's kind of heading that way.
Yeah, man.
We'll see.
You guys got the car seat ready to go?
Both cars. I had to learn how to strap it in. I felt very
Nice.
unqualified to be a parent,
Yeah.
but once I figured it out, I felt
You one step ahead of the game because a lot of folks, that car seat is not in the car by the time the baby comes. They like scrambling to get out the hospital while baby's in the hospital to get that car seat back in. So
right.
it's good you got that going, man.
Yeah, it's cool that everything's set. The nest is ready. Just
Uh-huh.
waiting on the arrival. So like
That'll
a
be
watching
cool.
game now. We're just sitting there anticipating it.
Yeah.
So
Looking forward to that, man. So what's your favorite sport?
growing up, I loved basketball, but now that I'm older, once I hit like high school and college, it was football for sure.
Yeah.
Like American football. I don't understand. You said that today was Hall of Fame Day, so
Yeah.
football season's about 2 weeks away, so I want
Oh,
a Hall
man.
of Fame.
My brother was, Josh was talking to me. He's like, man, football's, I think he said like 50 days away or something like that.
Oh yeah.
I said, I wish it was like 150 days away, man.
Nah, man.
All I know is when football season come back, I get the best naps, man. Because I
Oh.
hear that in the background, I'm like,
I swore when I met you that you were gonna tell me you were like a football player in college or something.
yeah, I never got into football. I never really got into the
You're
sport.
too big not to play football, man.
I don't know. I just don't enjoy the running like that, man.
Running, it wasn't that bad. Running went bad.
The conditioning,
Conditioning in the off
Conditioning
season was
was
rough
rough.
because it was in the middle of the summer.
yeah, it's rough. It was just not worth it for me in high school. I remember throwing up conditioning for basketball.
Oh yeah.
Thinking about getting in the game was worth it. I didn't have that same drive for football, so I never messed with it. So I'm not as big on football. Well, I'm not big on football, period. So I don't really know much players. But basketball, who's your favorite player? I feel like I know, but
Oh, yeah. My favorite player still, he's retired now, but Vince Carter.
Vince Carter.
Yeah.
Did not know
Yeah.
that then.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
VC.
I thought you was gonna say Ish Smith, man.
Like, Ish is the guy though, man. Growing up in Cabarrus
Nah.
County, man, Ish was
Yeah.
that dude. Yeah.
Vince Carter, yeah, he's the man, dude. I would have to hands down still say Jordan for me.
Well, yeah, he's right there. Yeah.
What are your thoughts with the whole LeBron Jordan?
I don't think it's a
argument?
debate, man.
Yeah,
Michael Jordan's the GOAT.
yeah.
Greatest of all time for sure.
It's funny because I go back and forth thinking about it. I wonder where Jordan would be at if he stuck with the game longer.
Yeah. Or if he would have, left and gone to 2 different superstar teams.
But
Join the
still,
Knicks.
if I look at LeBron's era, there's just not a player that could be like that single player to at least get your team to the playoffs. Unfortunately, he's not doing that no more. It's kind of sad watching him try, but
He's carrying the Olympic team right now, though, it looked like.
that's what I heard.
I saw he hit a game winner last night or 2 nights ago against
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia.
Yes,
MJ never had to hit game winners against Saudi Arabia in the Olympics.
And Michael Jordan, dude, his game was just it's iconic for basketball. The finesse, the airtime. Like LeBron is such a smart, strong player, but his game doesn't have the finesse that Jordan's game have. It's crazy.
I think LeBron's the greatest athlete to ever play basketball.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the strongest players to ever play the game. The most longevity.
Yeah.
What he's done is crazy. Like I'm not saying he's not great, but
Yeah.
I will never say he's better than MJ. You don't ever catch me saying that.
Nah, I feel you. People want to fight over that.
Yeah.
What I liked was All-Star, like the All-Star games, like I feel like I've been sleeping on them. They haven't been as exciting. But what I liked about 2022 was when they selected 75 players. They all came out with the Blazers to honor 75 years of the NBA. To see like Jordan and LeBron and all of them laughing and just the different generations that were represented there. Like I thought that was so dope as they called each one centers, first, power forwards, and all that. And to see them all together, kind of chilling out like that, I thought, bro, that was dope for the All-Star. Is there a player that you really like that you feel they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, but for whatever reason they're not? I don't even know if you stick with it like that. Like certain diehard fans, they'll know off the bat.
I don't know if VC's in there yet. I don't know if Vince is in there yet. He just recently retired.
I think. How recent?
He retired like 4 years ago.
I think you have to be retired for 4 or 5 years.
Yes, I don't think he's there yet. But.
I think, and don't get me wrong, I think he's being considered this year.
Okay.
I was gonna before say Chauncey Billups. He was one, but I think he's being considered for the 2024 as well. I always think how crazy it is to be in the Hall of Fame, like to be a player that's in there that just made it, and what it takes to actually get there. Like I feel like that would be such an honor to be in that circle of the Hall of Famers. I was looking up kind of like what their thoughts are for you to actually get there. And one of the things they said was it's simply and obviously no player will ever be inducted into their respective Hall of Fame if they perform at a mediocre level for the entirety of their career. To be truly exceptional, one must demonstrate their value above and beyond the average expected performance. But to the players that did not make the Hall of Fame, like you can't take that away from them. Like the NBA is what it is because of these key players. Stephon Marbury, not in the Hall of Fame, great player. Stoudemire, great player. There are good players that for whatever reason they just didn't make the Hall of Fame, but you could just remember plays that these players, the defense, the offense that they were a part of to contribute to the game. I think it's so dope to just be able to be a part of that story, even if you can't really say Hall of Fame. Now the Bible doesn't have Hall of Famers, and I think it could really mess with our heads if we did have Hall of Famers, because we get a little cocky with it. And though this term is not in the Bible, we do refer to Hebrews chapter 11 as the Hall of Faith. But you can't find a translation where they actually use that verbiage that Hebrews 11 is the Hall of Faith. Just some interpreters have adapted to that terminology, and it's just kind of stuck where when you think of Hebrews chapter 11, that's kind of like the Hall of Faith.
I saw where a verse opening up said the ancients.
Yeah.
Call them the ancients.
Yeah.
So I guess that could be kind of a way.
Yeah. It's so before we even look at Hebrews, who would be a person in the Bible that you feel has influenced you most Or maybe is they recently have really influenced you or inspired you as a person in the Bible. So maybe someone that you that's your go-to person. You're always just drawing from them outside of Jesus, because obviously Jesus don't count. He is the inspiration to all these inspirations. But either someone that's like, that's my guy, I always think of him or her, or recently, like someone has just really been, maybe through your reading, devotions, whatnot, this person has really been kind of inspiring you. Who would you say in the Bible that person is?
Well, I don't want to be like everybody else and say Paul.
Yeah.
That's definitely one. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna go with David.
David.
Yeah, I kind of reading through a little bit of his story and kind of how he reacted to different things as a king and before he was a king, and how he kind of carried himself throughout different situations, and how he constantly seek God and seek God's will, even though he had a huge, moments in life where he messed up,
Yeah.
fell short. I think it's inspiring to see how he always got back on his horse spiritually and
Yeah.
will kind of go forward.
Yeah. Yeah. David is two of my favorite is David and Paul. Those are like my two go-tos. David, because he messed up so much, he gives me hope through all my mistakes and failures and stuff. Paul, just to see someone who was not technically in that group, he was an outsider, he was an enemy of the church, to see God change his life and to see just the dedication that he set out to live by, the passion, the commitment. But today, because I didn't want to give either of those two, because I feel like those are the ones I always think about. I had someone new on my mind that I when I was thinking about them, I was like, bro, like his faith is pretty intense. And it was Joseph. And not Joseph as in Prince of Egypt and, the going into slavery, not that Joseph. Mary's husband, Joseph, the guy we see so little about. I always wish that there was more narrative to his story. Like, I'm like, there's not much at all about Joseph. And I think what really inspired me about him was, one, the faith that he had to have to believe Mary was a virgin and that child that she had was of God.
Yeah, I've thought about that, man. That's crazy, man. That's like extreme reliance on God, man. Like, I know how I'd reacted.
Yeah, use a lie.
You lying? Why you always lie?
Yeah. So I can't even fathom how, like, he had nothing to lean on to say, the ones in this time, they went through something similar. This feels familiar. Like he has to take her at the word. He takes the angel at the word when he gives that word from the Lord that this is of God. But then I just think, from God's point of view, what he saw in Joseph, to be able to entrust him to father his son. Like, he had to have seen something in Joseph that he knew the type of man he would be, that he would entrust his son to be born and be fathered by him till he was an adult. Like, that says something about his character, about the heart of Joseph, about and his willingness, because you see in the scripture that he was gonna divorce her privately. But he also knew what the consequence would be if that was known. Like, he could have put it on blast and she would have been stoned for that. Yeah. And he was going to do all of this quietly and respectfully, and then change her heart, and he stays the course. And what I think is even cooler, not cooler, but just as cool, is that he had to be a good influence to Jesus, that Jesus kind of followed in his footstep as an occupation. Like, if Jesus couldn't stand his earthly father, like, the last thing he probably would have done is be a carpenter, because that was his father. But he had to have set a good enough example where he just walked in that trade as well. So, though we don't have a lot of context for him, we have enough that I could look at that and be like, man, to have that kind of faith and know people were thinking, that's not yours, and to commit and to run your race and not waver. I'm like, man, so I wish there was more story to him. Yeah. I don't know what happened, man. I don't know how he left.
It's crazy to think like I feel like I'm blessed by God to have the gift of being a father soon, and that He would give me that opportunity. But to have the opportunity to raise God's son,
Yeah.
you gotta be a special man for that. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy to think
Yeah.
about. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, dude. So here we have the writers of Hebrews. When we look at this chapter, chapter 11, they are basically showing us what faith is. They're telling us what faith is, and then they show us what it looks like. And for me, that's always clutch because, again, this whole series being about faith, I think that's the biggest thing that we have to. I think it's just so important that we continue to talk about what is faith and what does it look like? Like, what does it produce? Because you be in the church long enough, it's almost like you check that off, and it's like, of course, we're in the faith. I'm of the faith. I walk by faith, not by sight. And then you just go, and we don't really revisit it and ask questions like, bro, how are you doing in your faith? How are you owning your faith? How are you living this thing out? How are you sharing your faith? And if that's not a conversation we have, you're not really being challenged to really think about the life you're living. And if you're even pointing people to Him, or if you're just being a good guy. And so I like conversations like this because it just makes us think. So you were in the very first episode of this season when we talked about what faith is.
right.
I won't even quiz you to ask if you remember how we defined that, but it's very easy to agree with something on the spot and say, yeah, that sounds right, that's true, and then you just forget about it. Like you're not mindful of it. So I think when we get to have a conversation like this, what it does is it helps us to revisit the things that we know are important. It's just if we're not having conversations about it, it's easy for us to kind of forget what faith really is and how it's meant to be active in our lives. So jumping in verse 1, I know you usually read what you do the NIV. NIV?
NLT, yeah, NIV. Right.
So which was the one that says "in the ancients"? Do you remember what translation that one was?
That was
Sounds King James.
I'll tell you right now. Hold up.
Sounds a little King James.
I don't think it was King James. Let's see, it was NIV.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
NIV.
it was NIV.
Look at that. So we have a collection of people that we read about in this chapter that have lived exemplary lives of faith, and they modeled for us what it means to live by faith. And I think it's challenging because it's very easy for us to say, well, that's what they did. I don't got to do anything like that. And I'm not saying we have to, but who's to say we're not supposed to? Right. So it starts off, and again, we'll just go through it and just kind of chop it up. Hebrews chapter 11, starting at verse 1, it says, this is New Living Translation, and it says, faith shows the reality of what we hope for, the evidence of the things we cannot see. I remember always growing up under, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When I read this one the other day, faith shows the reality of what we hope for. I don't know why it hit different, but when I read that, the image that came to my mind is that how your faith literally paints the reality of the things that you are truly hoping for. So if your hope is in the Lord, like it ought to be, and your faith is in Him, like faith creates the reality of the very thing that you are hoping for. It brings that thing to life. And now it becomes evidence, proof of the things that we cannot see, because we can't see God. And that's how powerful faith is, because now it brings to reality all that is inside that we're hoping for. And it now becomes evidence and proof, not just to us, but to other people that are watching. It becomes the evidence of the things that we can't see. And it says in verse 2 that through faith, the people in days of old, that's probably where yours jumped in and said.
Yeah, ancients.
Yeah.
It says, this is what the ancients were commended for.
Yeah. Yeah. And so New Living Translation says it was through their faith that the people in the days of the old earned a good reputation. And I've already said that's what they were known for. There's a lot of good things to be known for, but bro, for people to know Josh Honeycutt by his faith, that means you had to have taken some strides And it doesn't mean always so crazy, but there's something about a faithfulness to the Lord, even in the smallest things, that it just draws people's attention. So to be known for that, to have a reputation as being a man of faith is a powerful thing, I think, to have. And it says, by faith, verse 3, by faith we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than Cain did. Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man, and God showed his approval of his gifts. Although Abel is long dead, he still speaks to us by his example of faith. So even when I look at Abel, I'm like, my man, he gives an offering, and his life of faith is now proving, because it says it is because of his faith that he is now being seen. It's evident that he was a righteous man. So that meant that here's a man that is in a right standing with God. He's on good terms with God, and it's because of his faith that he is in good terms with God. And he's literally talking about, even though he's long dead, like his life, his story, his faith still speaks to us as an example of faith. Verse 5, it was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. He disappeared because God took him. For before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. Like, again, to be known, like that person lives to please him. And here he is, he didn't die.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just be taken up by God.
Yeah, we would think he died. That guy died. We just don't know how or where his body is.
Yeah, the Middle Eastern mafia got a hold of him.
Yeah.
For sure.
So he was hiding some,
Yeah.
But here the Bible's recorded, he didn't die. He was taken up.
That's crazy.
And he was known for a man that pleased God. And what's crazy is then you see in verse 6, and it's saying that it's impossible to please God without faith. So here you have a man, Enoch, that was known for pleasing God. And verse 6 tells us, bro, it is impossible to please God without faith. So I think even right there, if we pause right there, it challenges me to be like, if I want to really be pleasing to God, if I want my life to be pleasing to him, how am I living by faith right now? Like, what am I doing to live by faith? Have I figured it out, and now I'm in cruise control? And at that moment, is my life pleasing to him? Like, so we realize that our faith has to be active in order for us to live a life that is pleasing to the Lord. Right. And I wonder how challenging that is for certain people that really struggle with their faith. Like, this tells us that's the only way we can actually please him, is by living a life of faith. It continues to say that anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. Verse 7, it was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God, who warned him about things that had never happened before. So even Noah, he's asked to build something that's never been built before. And he's spending forever building this thing. And I could only imagine everyone walking by saying, this guy done lost his mind.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You're building what? What is that? And now you're trying to explain to someone what you're building. And the fact that it says that he obeyed God, who warned him about things that had never happened before. It's very likely that what had never happened before was rain coming, and rain like that would actually flood an earth. So now you're trying to explain to people, I'm making something you've never seen before to prepare for something you've never seen before.
It's like the doomsday people who just go out and start building forts and stuff, and cans of soup stocking up.
Yeah, they're crazy.
Yeah, they look crazy, yeah.
And here he is. It's not like it was for a month or so. It was a good amount of time. Here he is staying faithful at working, at building this large boat. And again, and it says, by faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world and he received the righteousness that comes by faith.
One is keeping in the faith, keeping with the faith.
Yeah.
Something that's kind of been speaking to me throughout, like reading this, and then recently going through a book that I read. It's talking about abiding in Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and how I feel like when you're living out your faith, that's what it is. It's abiding in Him and growing. And you're saying like they were credited as righteous because of their faith. I think in the first episode we talked about faith is action. It's like walking out what you say you're about.
Yeah.
And that's something that God's been really pressing on me, like more, to be more, what's the word I'm trying to say? Like take more initiative in my conversations and try to lead in that direction instead of trying to go around it or instead of trying to make them feel comfortable just because I don't want to press the issue.
Yeah.
Kind of pushing me more towards like, if this person doesn't know the Lord, this is your purpose. This is what you're here for. It's what you say you're about, and it's time to be about it.
Yeah.
So it's something that God's been really working in my heart, trying to like press me more into Him daily, and be more conscious of where I am presently. So
That's good.
So like when I'm reading through that, it keeps popping up saying "keeping in the faith" in my NIV version.
Yeah.
It's just something I just felt like goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, like again, I think this is so clutch, and that's why I love the conversation we've been having this season, because it's been, for me, it's been encouraging for me to kind of look inward and ask myself, I know you believe this, and faith is always one of those subjects I always like to engage in, but it can't just be a subject you love talking about.
Right.
It's like, do you love it enough that you live it? Do you love it enough that you're finding ways to share it? Because if you don't, do you really love it, or do you love the idea of it? And it's so easy for us to be there. We love the idea of X, Y, and Z. But the Bible says, you see in James, like faith without works, without action is dead, it's useless. So if our faith stops at a belief system, this is how I believe, and that's all it does. And the furthest we take our faith is Sunday morning service. That's the furthest I go with it. Maybe my devos in the morning, but it doesn't compel me to make changes. It doesn't compel me to figure out how I can share His good news and encourage people. It doesn't encourage me to maybe pull away from this and maybe die to this and maybe start this. Then my faith really isn't living. It isn't active.
Right.
It's something that's dormant, and the Bible says, well, that's useless then. That serves no purpose. So we're looking at these people, and I'm like, man, these guys, it was always by faith. It was by faith. It wasn't by their works, and it was because of the faith that they clung to that they were able to experience these things with the Lord. And it's funny because Noah's one that they throw out, and they're like, he's a drunkard.
Right.
I'm like, come on, guys. There's one account we got from that, man.
Yeah.
And now Noah's a drunk.
Right.
Like,
whole world just ended.
yeah. Good night. Like, let's dial it back. Because clearly we see that he obeyed God. He did what he was asked, and he received righteousness that comes by faith. And this was way after Noah did what he did, and after he had a little bit too much wine in that vineyard, and he still gets to have that label that he was considered righteousness. So, verse 8, it says, it was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. That always blows my mind, dude. For the Lord to tell you to go, and you're like, yo, where you go, I'll go, Father. You tell me where to go. And he's like, I just need you to go. And it's like,
all right.
Where? It's like, tell me more, please. And he's like, just trust me. Just get your stuff together and just go in that direction. You'll know. Like, bro, the fact he did that, not knowing where he was going. And in verse 9, and when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith, for he was like a foreigner living in tents. And so did his son Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. Verse 10, Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city where eternal foundations a city designed and built by God. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and too old. She believed that God would keep his promise. And so a whole nation came from this one man who was as good as dead. That's like, that's dirty, man. That's their way of saying he was so old. My man was
Good
as
as dead.
good as dead.
Yeah.
And God used a man like that to be able to fill this world, multiply, and have so many kids. And it says a nation with so many people that, like the stars in the skies and the sand of the seashore, there is no way to count them. We're reading all these accounts, and none of these players look like superstars.
Right.
There is no LeBron. No, there's no MJs, no Vince Carter's coming in. That's just, bro. They're eloquent with their skill set, and they're just. It's like you're looking at these people, and when you see their story and you hear about what their challenges were, they weren't no superstars, but they were encouraging. Verse 13, it says, "All these people died, still believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. They
They're talking
agreed."
about the right here.
Yeah.
I'm wondering this. Are they talking about the salvation here for them, for like Christ not being able to see Christ come yet?
Yeah,
they
that's the
talking
big
about
picture. It's like,
The kingdom, like, did they go into the kingdom after death? Like, that's probably a really deep question. But
yeah. So most of the time it's because the promise was the coming Messiah for majority of these guys. It's the coming Messiah. He's gonna be. So they all died, never seeing him.
that's the promise.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the full promise that's coming into fruition.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the excitement is, bro, one day the king, he's going to come into this world and he's going to die for us. He's going to be amongst us for a certain amount of years. He's going to die for us, and then we're going to all be united. He's going to bring a new kingdom down here. So you're hearing these prophecies all these years and all these years. So for the New Testament to finally be able to see this is the guy who, I could imagine for some of them it was so challenging because you hear about something for so long, you grow kind of skeptic now of like, how do we know this is really the guy? And I guarantee you there were probably countless other guys who already said they were the prophecy. So you got to weave through all those weeds, and then you finally have the one. So it says they all agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on earth. So they basically they didn't receive what was promised, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. And they agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on earth. Obviously, verse 14, people who say such things are looking forward to a country they can call their own. If they had longed for the country they came from, they could have gone back. But they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeland. That is why God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Verse 17, it was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promises, was ready to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. I don't think that story will ever get old. Like, he waited a long time to have his own son from his wife. Now, obviously, he had a previous son that he had from his housemaid. But it wasn't the same. And it wasn't the promise he gave them. So he finally gets his son, and then God is asking him to sacrifice his son. And the faith he had to follow through with that. 18, even though God had told him, Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted, Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life again. And in a sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. So even to have that faith where he was so confident, where he was like, he knew what he was going to have to do. He's done this enough time with lambs and other animals. Like, he's knowing now, this is what I'm going to have to do with my son. God is able to bring him back if this is exactly what I got to do. That faith is just surreal.
There wasn't even like the Lazarus story yet. All those stories you hear in the New Testament, like he just saw God as that big.
Yeah.
Like he has just a broad view of God that he thought, if I do this, he'll fix it.
Yeah.
Because I'm just obeying what he told me to do.
Yeah.
And he promised me this, so it can't end like this.
And you know what's crazy? I could imagine if other people knew about it, what they would have said to him, how
Yeah.
crazy they would have made him feel, how they would have questioned his God.
It's like a common theme. Each person looks like
Yeah.
they're crazy. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, can you have faith and look cool with it?
Right. Look like it right now.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
ain't. I think sometimes that's the direction we go because we want to be maybe relevant,
Yeah.
relatable.
Mm.
We don't want to be John the Baptist, the crazy guy.
Right.
But at some point,
I feel like John would have worn Crocs for sure.
yeah,
John the
definitely,
Baptist.
he definitely would have
Some
in today's
Crocs,
day.
maybe
and
some Real Tree T-shirts.
age. You would have fit right in with him, man.
Yeah.
Yo, so man, it's crazy because we're at some point we're all gonna have someone tell us, "Bro, you're crazy. I could have never done that. Like, I can't believe you did that. That was crazy."
Yeah.
But it still wouldn't even scratch the surface for the craziness that these people live through. But I guess you can't have faith with without a little bit of crazy. You got to be a part of that. Continuing, verse 20, it was by faith that Isaac promised blessings for the future to his sons, Jacob and Esau. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed in worship as he leaned on his staff. It was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. And even when he even commanded them to take his bones when they left. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born.
Ooh, that part right there. I think it's crazy that his parents weren't believers. They still saw something beyond just the baby coming down the river. They saw like something good, something like powerful coming through him.
Yeah.
They didn't know what it was, but they had faith in whatever it was.
And it's crazy. We don't hear nothing about his parents either, dude.
Yeah, we don't know if they went with him when he left Egypt.
Like you see, you know he connects back with his sister.
Right. So,
but mom and dad, I don't know.
Are they talking about his body? Not talking about his biological. Are they talking about?
Yeah, because at this point, this is when they hid him for 3 months when he was born, and they remember that's when they put him in that basket.
I thought they were talking about Pharaoh's daughter who found him.
Yeah,
it says parents hid him. I got you.
Yeah,
talking about his biological. So now I'm just looking stupid out here.
No, man.
I was looking at that earlier and I was like, man, that's crazy to talk about his parents in Egypt, but I didn't even catch what it says, the parents that hid him.
Yeah, Moses' parents. All good, man.
All right, let's keep it rolling.
Let's keep it going. It says, then they saw that God had forgiven them that God had given them an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's commands. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. That faith to just deny comfort, to deny royalty, like that whole good life. And you're like, bro, I would rather suffer with my people than to live it up here in this kingdom.
Right.
Like only your faith would be willing to lay it all down and say, that ain't worth it. 27, it was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who was invisible. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. Verse 29, it says, it was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. And when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. It was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days and the walls came crashing down. It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God. For she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Was not destroyed. Hopefully that's what I said. Was not destroyed with the people in her city. 32, how much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of faith of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. So we have a list of just Old Testament people who, again, they're remembered for their faith. And it doesn't even keep going with the list because it says we could keep going. But it's difficult to, like, truly take time and read a chapter like this. Obviously, we're kind of flying through it a little bit more on this episode, but it's difficult to not read some of this on your own time, and even now, and then not be encouraged to want to imitate the faith that they had, especially when you see how they were viewed and what they were accounted for. Like when you see, and he was known for pleasing God, and he was known as being righteous to God. It's like you would have to just genuinely not really be moved by it, or that not be a goal of yours, to not read Hebrews 11 and in that way either be convicted for the lack of faith you're living in and living out, or to be like motivated and inspired to want to live by faith. So my question would be, not just after hearing some of this now, but even, as you've read it before in the past, how would you say this chapter, what this chapter has done for your faith personally when it came to just Hebrews 11?
When coming out of a season of just returning to the Lord, just seeing people who had messed up, people who weren't perfect, and we just read about Rahab being a prostitute, and how her faith did something miraculous, and now she's known for her faith.
Yeah.
Over what she used to be.
Yeah.
And seeing stuff like with you were saying, like with Noah, people kind of throwing stones at him, and then him being known for a man of God who lived by faith. That really encouraged me when I was coming out of that. Looking at it now, currently, it's convicting because, talking about abiding in Christ every day, it's something that kind of pushes me want to do it more, because you see these guys who just obeyed, and they didn't care how crazy it made them look. They didn't care. They didn't care, what people thought about them, what their opinion was. They only cared about the opinion of God.
Yeah.
And I think that's it even says it's a kingdom mindset. Like they weren't thinking about the country here. They were thinking about a land that they were not. They thought they were part of that land, the kingdom. They weren't part of this world here.
Yeah.
And they consider themselves foreigners, and just having that mindset is something that's been really pressed on to my thoughts lately. How I can do that in my day-to-day, just doing sales and in the house that I'm in with my wife and soon-to-be baby, and how I can be a parent in that way, how I can live that out outside of my community and church. It's real easy when you're with church people to talk about your faith and go and serve with your community. But once you're outside of that in the real world with people who don't believe, like how am I going to react to people who are, coming at me strong in the workforce, or having a bad day and say something mouth off to me? How am I going to react to that?
Yeah.
These are all things that God's kind of like opening my eyes to and kind of building me up in, I feel like, right now.
Yeah.
So just seeing people who, weren't perfect, living it out still is encouraging, but at the same time it's convicting to say, this is our calling.
Yeah. I wonder how many of us we truly live like this is in our home. Like, I'm in a place now where I love where I'm at. I love the city. And even then I'm like, can you really be like that and still feel like this is not home though? Like, this is a good spot to be in. And Lord, give me a heart for these people. Help me not to get so comfortable though, where it's like, I love my home, right, and I want to build my kingdom, and I want wealth to leave behind. And again, not to say, generational wealth and all that stuff is bad. I'm not saying that. I wonder the mindset that you have and what becomes priority and what's no longer a priority when you look forward to real home.
Right.
And knowing this isn't home. I'm a foreigner. I'm a nomad with no real place. Like, this is not home. Like, I wonder how it feels to be like that. Because I can honestly say I'm not there. I don't feel like a foreigner.
Right.
I feel like a foreigner around certain people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm Hispanic and they're like, they make me feel some kind of way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I kind of want to feel that way. I kind of want to have that discomfort, that unsettledness in my heart where I'm like, I just want to go home. I want to be home with you.
Yeah.
I think that would change some of my goals and my aspirations, and I ain't worrying about no sneaker game, yo, because I'm just trying to put on my heavenly sandals and and just be with the Lord and not worry about some of the stuff that I think that we work towards. So yeah, I think even when you brought that point up, yeah, it's hard to read that and not think about, bro, these examples, they lived like that. They had that mindset. And to your point, like when you look at this chapter, none of them were perfect. There were many of them failed. Like, and some of them had some like character flaws, like major character flaws.
Moses with anger.
Yeah.
As soon as somebody would disobey, he would just react in anger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet they still got to be talked about and written and recorded. So now we look at their life. And that just shows even more how our faith is less about us and more about him. It's about his grace and his mercy that he still allows us to be a part of his story, and how he chose to use us throughout our mistakes and our failures and our shortcomings. When I look at Abraham, and you see Abraham, he's quick to be like, that ain't my wife, that's my sister. Yeah. And then he's like, come on, if God told you to go there, you don't think he was gonna protect you, like, and protect your woman, like? And then he does it again. Right. After God spares him, and then he goes into another city. He does that same thing again, dude. And I'm like, my guy, the first time, okay, but you saw the Lord come through. Why are you doing this again? Fear set in. Right. And then his son do the same thing. The same exact thing, like father, like son. And here we have people that's not what Abraham is known for. That's how we treat each other. Right. The moment we make those mistakes, that's what you are, dog. Yeah, you did some good, but that's what we know you for. Right. And that's not the way God is. So it is so encouraging that you see these people, they have this turning point where even through their mistakes and their flaws, they still confidently chose to trust him and move forward with him. Right. And I feel like that's dope to see that.
Yeah. It's cool too, like, well, not cool, but when growing up when I was young, and people that are younger now that I'm talking to, they're like, they kind of point out these things and they say, well, if God, still loved them and they were followers of Christ and they did all these things, then I can do this and be fine. Yeah. But it's despite what they did. Like, they weren't trying to do those things. These are things that kind of came out of reaction, with Moses murdering the Egyptian. Yeah. With Noah drinking too much wine one day on accident. Yeah. What was the accident?
Yeah. But, it was a hard day working this field. I just want to reward myself. And then,
like, you see those things when you're young and you're like, oh, I can do that then if they did it. You kind of think of it as like an automatic pass.
Yeah.
You don't see it as just they got past that because of grace.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you can't. We would be crazy to be like, well, Noah got, David got to smash that chick, and that wasn't his wife. So surely
concubines.
Surely a little slap on my wrist, and I'll be fine.
Right.
But the thing is that they all had to deal with the consequences still of their sins, all of them. Yeah. I mean, David lost his first child. Like, as much as he earnestly prayed for his son not to die, his son died. Like, there's still consequences for our mistakes. And the Lord, because of his love for us, he won't spare us from a lot of these consequences. Because then we get this mentality, oh, daddy's got me. He's going to bail me from this again. And that does not create in us the heart that he wants us to have, the character that he wants us to have. A lot of time it's the pain that brings growth in our lives. And sometimes it's the pain from our choices that we made.
They kind of saw those moments as falling away from God.
Yeah.
to where we kind of see it as, I'm living for God. I just do this one thing on the side,
Mm.
and just to see them return and live in faith after that. It's
Yeah.
kind of what got them through that hope that they were clinging to, like you're saying.
Yeah. So when we continue, we get to see their acts of faith summarized in verse 33, picking up where we left off. It was saying that by faith, these are the actions. These people overthrew kingdoms. They ruled with justice. They received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions. They quenched the flames of fire and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. Like, I'm looking at that like, man, your faith, when you're allowed to live out your faith, your weaknesses can be turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from death, but others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. All of these victories we see, they were achieved by faith. But then it's like this passage takes this like unexpected turn. And it's like it gives you full picture, like the highs and the lows, the good times and the bad. And it starts in verse 36. Some were jeered at, which means taunted or mocked. Not as serious, but it sucks to be made fun of and laughed at and
Yeah,
mocked.
right now you're like, okay,
Yeah, I
I'll
can take
experience
that.
Yeah.
Hurts my pride a little bit, but whatever. And their backs were cut open with whips. Wow, that's a big jump from getting made fun of and people calling you stupid and goofy and whatever. Others were chained in prison. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half, and others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. These are God's chosen people that they're living by faith, and even this stuff happens. The life of faith that we're called to live doesn't mean things will always go well. And I think sometimes when we don't tell that to each other, when we don't share that with new believers, we set them up for failure because we sell them on this. God wants you to have your best life now, and it's like, whoa, like pump the brakes. God does want what's best for you, but even God's own son was murdered and went through injustices and things that were just not fair, and all his disciples, like the Bible makes clear, Jesus makes clear in this world you're going to have troubles of many kind, but take heart, I overcame the world. So I think it's just giving people a big picture. The reward for living a life of faith is not receiving passes from trials and getting this pass from that deathly disease. And the reward is the life that is to come. That is the life, that is the reward of living a life of faith, that I live a life that is pleasing to him. I get to be a part of what he's asking me to be a part of. He comes back. He makes a new world here on earth. Real life begins. But again, Abel's the first person that's in this list. Adam and Eve's firstborn. And, or Cain and Abel. Which one was first, Cain or Abel?
I think Abel.
Abel? Who was holding whose heel? I can't remember the story now. One of the babies is holding somebody's heel.
That was Esau and
Oh, that was, wow.
See, we all make mistakes.
We make mistakes. I was actually quizzing you, and you
Oh, I
passed.
appreciate that redemption right there. Yeah.
But you look at Abel. Here's the first guy in the list, and my man did everything right. And he gave an offering to the Lord that was worship to him, that was great, that the Lord found favor in. And God didn't intervene when his brother was so jealous that he came and killed him. Like, this is the first one we read about in this whole list of everyone that has lived by faith. So if it starts like that, I mean, what does that tell you about our faith? Like, buckle up. This is going to be a ride. There's going to be good times. There's going to be bad times. But the reward in the end will be worth all that you went through. I doubt Abel's tripping about this now, man. dang, they got me quick, man. He's like that first guy that died in a horror movie. It's like, golly, I didn't even make it past the first scene. It's like, don't worry, you're gonna be back, man. You coming back. And it changes and it really messes with the way we think sometimes when it comes to faith. So you look at verse 39 and it says, and this is the end, it says, all these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. For God had something better in mind for us, so they would not reach perfection without us. Like, I just see that and I'm like, bro, it is so encouraging to see these people and again, take this burden off of us trying to feel like we have to have it all together. But it's difficult. It's difficult to really live this life of faith and to be human, because it's not that God doesn't forgive. It's that I think people around us make it a little bit harder. And then we feel a certain kind of way, because sometimes I could feel like, oh man, I got to make sure I don't say something or do something that would make Josh look at me weird now or different now, because now he's going to be like, dude, I would have never thought you would have lost it like that. I don't know, man. I don't see you the same now. So now that's going to be hard for me to accept that you're like, bro, I forgive you, but I don't know if I can see you the same now. Right. And I'm like, how do we live with that? That's the part that we have to realize, bro, none of us got it made. If for some reason I ever do step on, you cross the line or step on your toe in a way where it's awkward for a season, it's like you pray that we can get through this, because none of us are perfect. But you see this all throughout here where it's like faith does not guarantee things will go smoothly for us, and doesn't guarantee everything will line up in front of us and that the doors will just start flying open. But it does guarantee us living a life that will be pleasing and fulfilling and satisfying. And it does guarantee that we would live a life that would now please him. And I think if that's the goal, then I'll accept some of the blowouts that's on the side that happens as a result of me just being human. And that just shows even more how much I need him, because I'm not perfect, because I can lose my cool, because what you did was just so freaking irritating. But I forgive you. It's just whatever. Let's just keep moving. We're human. I think when people see that grace amongst us, I think it will attract them a little bit more to the fold, because then they feel like they can be human and try to get into this rhythm of what it means for them to live by faith as well. Yeah. So, go ahead.
It's cool how scripture kind of like you were talking about earlier with David and Moses, like kind of you see that part and you think like, if that would happen to me right now, that's all anybody would ever know me as for the rest of my life. But scripture just keeps moving.
Yeah.
And it's like he still he returned, lived by faith, and did this for God. And it like mentions it and it just goes right past it.
Yeah.
And it's to see that grace in scripture, I feel like the church would be a lot better off if we could do that for our own brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
You see, like, people are now like pastors right now that are falling, and now like the first thing you see on social media is just them getting like blasted.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always wondering, like, I mean, he's human,
Mm-hmm.
These pedestals, and I don't know. It's just something I've been noticing with, like, as a pastor in particular that I'm not going to name, but like I really looked up to. And I watched a lot of his sermons, and like recently he just, went through a conflict in his personal life and stepped down. And I was kind of looking at that, like, people on there's people supporting him because they know his integrity.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, there was people who were trying to roast him. And I just kind of wonder how God looks at that, like it kind of shows us here in the scripture,
Yeah.
He sees the fault, but by faith, you can still do works for his kingdom.
Yeah. So. That's a good point, because the reality is you and I are not that important to that story. Right. Like, David did all that stuff, but the Bible was not to be surrounded around him.
Yeah.
He messed up. He kept moving. God raises someone else. There were things that he got disqualified for. And now your son can move forward with it. We'll keep it moving. My will does not stop with you. I'll use someone else. And it does take pressure off of us, but it does also hurt our pride. Because, we want to feel needed. We want to feel important. We want to feel like we're making a difference. So I think when we kind of squander that, it definitely does. It definitely takes some time to come back to reality and realize what this whole thing really is about. It is all about him. So I think when we live a life of faith that truly is about him, when we make mistakes and when we fall short, it's like, hey, that highlights even more why I'm committed to him, because I need him. That's why. Like, if you looked at me that much and you were, that's on you. Like, I don't even put myself up there like that. Like, I do want to strive to live a life worthy of the calling, but I'm still human, and I do want to continue to grow and continue to be and grow in my faith and be who he's called me to be. And I hope that I'm closer to him now than I was 2 years ago. Ideally, that's how we should see growth like that. But if not, then make this year be the year that you try to push further and go get closer to him. But I would love to just live a life where my faith will not only encourage and inspire others, but encourage them to get closer to him, to see what
to the true rabbi, Jesus. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Like if your faith really intrigues someone to really want to know him, bro, you doing it right. If your faith really just stops at people just, bro, you're killing it. Your faith is killing it, dude. I could never do what you do. And, man, you the man. And we fell short. Like, if it's not pushing people to his goodness and to his kindness, we got to reevaluate why we're choosing to live by faith. And I doubt any of those jokers were trying to live their lives in such a way where they could make that cut. But it's dope to live a life that way, and then God chooses to use them nonetheless. So it's like, God, may I live a life of faith that honors you, and whatever you choose to do with this story, this narrative, it's all you. So, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No. I mean, it was cool reading through that and, seeing the characters that it would list, and then seeing, the encouragement we got through the conversation of just how God views us as his children.
Yeah.
And also how we can fall short, but we can also get back up because of him.
That's right.
Because of who he is. That's encouraging. At the same time, it's convicting to live out my faith daily. So appreciate the convo and
yes,
to
sir.
the scripture this week.
Yes, sir. Let's get in it. So on that note, dream the dreams that God has placed inside of you, live the life that he has called you to, and love the way he loves you. Grace and peace.